the fact that you became the celebrated writer doesn't quite go with the way you started out. You've been described as a Midwestern outlaw turned professor.
I have, and worse,
And
actually.
well, yeah, I just used the nicest one I could find. Now, that's quite a leap.
It's something that has taken place over numerous decades of turning my life around from I was in jail 4 times before I finally realized that this was no future for me. And I happened to be lucky enough, and I actually dedicate Murdering the Mom to the judge that refused to put me in reform school. He told me, if you go back to Minnesota and live with your seemingly sane relatives up there who want you, my aunt and my uncle especially wanted me, you don't have to go. And even though there was pressure and people even saying they're going to sue him if he didn't put me in what's called Golden Reform School in Golden, Colorado. And well, you know, there was your choice. And so
Yeah, because this time in these prison terms were all pretty much before you were even 18, I think.
Right. The last time I was in prison when I was 15.
Right.
And they didn't have the kind of prisons that they have now, juvenile hall type things. I mean, they just threw you in a cell.
Yeah.
So,
Because you kind of had a tendency to drive other people's cars.
yes, I know.
without their permission.
I loved cars.
Your car's
Whatever was available, Fords and Chevys were easiest to hotwire. Buicks were really easy too. So yeah, I did a lot of that. It was sort of a habit. Every Friday I would catch the bus and go down to Denver, and I would cross over into Adams County because I lived in Arapahoe County, and I felt I was honor bound not to steal from my own county. But anybody else's county was fair game. So I would go to Adams County, and invariably I'd find a car.
He had standards.
Yes. We all rationalize the way we do
Certainly.
things, right? So I rationalize it like that.
Yeah. So you would go to the other county.
I'd go to Adams County, and I would find myself a car. Like I say, usually a Ford, a Buick, or a Chevy, because they were easy in those days. I don't know how many of you know this about these cars, but especially Chevys and Buicks, they had a off and they had a lock, and so many owners would just turn it to off, and so you could hop right in, turn it to on, step on the starter was in the accelerator, boom, boom, and off you'd go, and so I'd just drive it around. I mean, I wasn't trying to race with the cops or anything like that. I just had myself free wheels, and I'd go pick up a girlfriend of mine, and we'd go driving, and she was in a stolen car, and you know how kids are, teenagers, they don't have a brain in their head, you know.
And this was the early 50s, I'm guessing.
This was mid-50s.
Mid-50s?
Mid-50s when I was doing all of this stuff. And I got away with it dozens of times. And then, you know, you keep pushing your luck, eventually somebody's going to rat you out. And so I finally did get caught. I took a car off a Ford lot. And I liked it so much,
See, I only bring you the best.
I kept it for 3 days. And I went out to Rocky Mountain Arsenal, if any of you are familiar with that area outside of Denver. And I wanted to see how fast it would go. And I burned up the engine. And I had to walk home from there, which was many miles. And there was a friend with me. God rest his soul, he's dead now. Had a heart attack about 2 years ago. And he was bad. And they always went to look for him when cars got stolen as well. And so they picked him up, and they grilled him until he finally gave them my name. And then they came to my house and said, "Come with me, little boy," and they took me to jail. So that started the whole beaming in on Duff Brenna and what was he doing? What's his what's happening with this guy? And so just about every cop in Aurora.
You got a reputation.
Knew me. Yeah, I got a reputation, and so they all knew me, and they started looking at me when things went wrong. Things got stolen, cars, so on and so forth. And then it was just a cycle, one after the other. They picked me up. Yeah, I did it. Jail, jail. So finally, like I say, Gene Jacobucci said, "Kid, you're not a bad kid. I can tell you're a pretty good guy. Actually, I don't want to put you in reform school, but I can't have you in this town. You have got to get out of this town. These people want you. Go to them." And my mother says, "Oh yeah, go to them." She'd had enough by then too, poor mom. So I write about her in this, and in this book, she's sort of like the main focus of the book.
Yeah.
And what the poor lady had to put up with.
The you've credited the Army with teaching you the discipline to actually become a writer, and I've been wondering, what kind of a soldier were you?
I was just not bragging, but I was a good soldier.
Yeah.
I rose to Sergeant E5 rank in the 3 years that I was in the 82nd Airborne. And what the Army did that I sorely lacked, was discipline me. You don't mess around with those guys. You might be a tough guy, but they're tougher than you, and they will put you through hell if you keep doing what you thought you could get away with because you got away with it on the outside. And so I learned fairly quickly through boot camp, AIT, and then through jump school that these people needed to be respected and said, yes sir and no sir too. And once I caught on to how all that worked, I rose very fast as the ranks could go. I rose, from PFC to SB4, finally to Sergeant E5, and I would say I was a very good soldier. I did see action in the Dominican Republic and accounted myself well. I didn't run that way instead of that way. And it taught me, that is a Dominican Republic and that rebellion, the communist rebellion they were calling it, taught me that I did not want to go to war. I did not like it. I did not like the things I saw. I did not like bullets whizzing past my ears. I did not like the death I saw, the burning of bodies that I saw. I didn't want anything more to do with it. And Vietnam was hot at that time, and our whole outfit was supposed to go from the Dominican Republic to Vietnam. One of the times I've been lucky in my life was when I joined the Army, and then the day that I got out, because the day that I got out, well, it was within 2 months of when I got out, my whole outfit went to Vietnam. I went west. I got out of the Army. They tried to talk me into staying in. They were going to send me to OCS to become an officer. They were going to give me bonuses, and and I just knew this was not for me. I did not want to go to Vietnam and join in that slaughter. So I didn't.
Well, yeah, because like the judge said, you were a good kid who liked to steal cars. You were not a violent criminal.
No.
You were, yeah. We were talking last Sunday. Samantha Dunn, some of you were here for that. We were talking about memoir. And one of the things that came up was the responsibility of the memoir, and in particular, the scandal of James Fry and Million Little Pieces and so forth. And you guys had the same agent, Nan Talese.
Yes.
Now, she's a huge agent to have. I mean, she was when you got her, and she is to this day.
She has her own imprint.
Right.
Yeah.
How did that relationship with Nan Talese come about? That you decided this is the one? And
Well, the agent I had then was Sandy Dykstra. Anybody heard of her?
I know
She's
Sandy.
from
She's in San Diego.
Del Mar. Yeah, from Del Mar. And I had 3 offers on the book of Mamie, and Nan Talese's offer was actually one of the lower ones. but Sandy said, if you go with her, she'll really promote your book. So I could have gotten like 3 times as much from Marl that I got from Doubleday, but because of the reputation of Man Police, I decided to go where my agent. I didn't care that much about the money. I just wanted the book to get out there and people to get to know it, and so
Sure.
I went with her, and that lasted through 2 books, and like I say, didn't sell as well as she had hoped, but then Picador wanted me, so I just took my next book to Picador.
Now, at the time you were writing novels,
Mm-hmm.
and what we were talking about A Million Little Pieces was that somehow Nan was held responsible for selling it as a memoir when actually a lot of it was fiction. Do you remember anything about that whole thing and what, you were probably working on your memoir at the time.
I remember what a scandal that was. And I remember talking to James Brown about it, who's been up here and has read to you folks.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
And his book, his memoir, Los Angeles Diaries, you've heard of that, came out at the same time as the pieces came out. And he was livid. I mean, he was practically in a rage. And he said, have you ever met that little motherfucker? He was tearing apart. His James book sold well, won a lot of prizes, and it's absolutely, when you read that book, everything is true in that book.
Mm-hmm.
You read little, what's his name's book?
James Fry. James Frey or Fry?
Yes.
Fry.
It should be fried.
First of all, it's not that well written. You get through 2 or 3 pages and you wonder why. Why did Oprah pick this book? What the hell? This. And you read James Brown, and here you've got a total professional, beautiful voice writing to you that is mesmerizing. I mean, that's a page-turner book. And because of that book, I got it. I don't do this. I don't write fan letters. But I did write Brown a fan letter saying, man, this book, if I could write a memoir like this. And it was his memoir that really got my memoir going. It was like, you can really write this stuff? It's okay to be this honest, to expose yourself in this way? And Jim doesn't hold back anything. This is who I am. You take me or leave me. And so when I wrote my memoir, memoirs are tricky things. The memory's tricky. You never know sometimes if you're actually right on the beam. And I would give that certain sections to my sister and say, do you remember it this way? And half the time she'd say, no, I don't remember that, Duffy, but you know what? I've blacked out so much from that period in our lives that I don't want to remember it. And so I would just go with the way my memory was dictating to me, and keeping in mind what Brown said, it's your memories, it's your life as you see it, and you just be honest to that, and you're not lying. You're not pulling a Fry thing on anybody. So every word in there is as true as I know how to make it, although it might not have actually happened exactly the way or exactly the time period. Timelines are really hard in memoirs. How to figure out what year certain things happened. And you want the thing to mesh, you want it to blend, you want it to flow. As some critic remarked, this thing reads like a novel,
Right.
he said. And that's how I wanted it to be. So I didn't want to be stopping and starting and stuttering and putting things in that was just because they happened, a paragraph of this, a paragraph of that. I wanted it all to be connected, and so I worked and I worked and I worked until I think I got it all
Into a flowing narrative.
It's a flowing narrative.
Yeah, definitely. The way that that Murdering the Mom has been described is that Duff Brenna elevates the obscene to the sublime, and I read it and I loved it, which is the reason why we're talking, elevates the obscene to the sublime means that that he had to put a lot of incredibly painful episodes on the page, but at the same time respect the reader and respect the tradition of writing, like you said, so that it reads like a novel. What was the hardest part of creating of turning your life into a work of art?
Hard parts, I would say. There are a number of things that one looks at in the memoir, not the least of which is you're not just exposing yourself, you're exposing other people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my mother was dead by then, by the time this memoir got finished. I started writing it very soon after she died. 1995, she died. And she was a glamorous, would-be, if she could be, movie star. Mm-hmm. She once had a screen test, or at least she told me she had a screen test, and the reason that she turned down the movie or whatever it was because she had 2 children at that time, and she wanted to take care of her children. My mother would exaggerate things, and so that you would never know for sure if what you were getting was, really, really what happened, But she was beautiful enough to be a movie star, and she certainly had the acting ability. She had 2 personalities, or 3 or 4. It depends on who was in the room, and so when I'm writing about her, she's such a complicated person that I do question myself about how close am I to the real woman here, and what would she think? And I've had people, I've done these before, and people say, well, I've read your memoir. What would your mother think of that? And I have to say, honestly, knowing her as well as I do, or maybe not so well, I think she would be absolutely thrilled to see her face right here on the front of this cover. And I'm not so hard on her. I mean,
no, you're not. That's the thing that I was thinking, is that of all the people in the book, I think maybe because of a son's love for his mother, no matter what, that she actually comes across as a very, like you said, very glamorous, very romantic figure. She loved falling in love.
Yes.
That was her big aim. Fame and fortune and whatever, I think, were kind of secondary to this idea of love that she had. That I don't think she ever really got.
She wanted the perfect love, just like going to the movie. She loved to go to movies.
Right.
She'd come home, she'd tell you all about Victor Mature and John Wayne and all these glamorous men, and she wanted her men to look like that, and so they would be almost carbon copies of one another. As she would bring them home,
and there were several.
Yeah, there's several. Well, she was married 6 times.
Okay. All right, there were 6.
Probably would have been
More than
7
that.
or 8 if she could have just kept it up. But 6 times she was married, and every time it was glamorous love hitting her, and she would just go into this whole different mood. She'd get rid of her depression. She wouldn't drink so much. She'd love to go dancing with her new man. She would take me sometimes with her and my sister, and we would go and do these things with her. And like a lot of people, she was just in love with love, or in love with infatuation.
Right.
Those first few weeks when you're really into somebody, and then eventually, unfortunately, she would marry a lot of them, and then within a few months, she'd be going like, why didn't you tell me? Well, Mom, because I began to have opinions about some of these guys, when she would bring them home, but she'd marry them, and then she'd get rid of them and move on to the next one,
Well, unfortunately, she was not a good picker either. It wasn't just that the infatuation didn't last, or that it didn't, come into, it being, real love.
Mm-hmm.
But some of these guys were really, really bad guys.
Yeah, they were bad guys, but she had one really good guy, and he was a policeman from San Diego. Just like she likes him, he was about 6'2", tall, dark, and handsome, all that sort of thing. And boy, did he keep her in line. Now that's one thing my mother needed. She needed a keeper. She needed someone. His name was George Miles. She needed a George Miles in her life. They were married for 13 years, and they would have stayed married, I'm positive, if he hadn't died of cirrhosis of the liver. So the 13 years that she was with George were I think, from looking at it from afar, of course, were the happiest years of her life. And I think it's because she had such a disciplined man with a disciplined routine who would not let her get away with her.
What number was he in the lineup?
George would be, okay, Nick. There was another George Ellis. He'd be number 4.
Okay.
George would be number 4.
But the one that figures most significantly in your life is, I can't remember his name right now, but he's the
Nick
one that got
Pappas.
to Nick Pappas.
Nick Pappas,
Yeah.
yeah, he was number 3.
Oh, number 3.
Yeah.
Okay, so Nick Pappas was a very difficult stepfather for you because you guys had the quintessential love-hate relationship.
It was he was when he came into my life, I was a little sissy anyway. I would cry if he looked at me cross-eyed, and he hated that. He'd just come out of World War II, the Navy, and then he went into the Air Force. Another 6'2", tall, dark, and handsome guy with just muscles. He would stand in front of the mirror in our living room, and he would pose, and he would say, "What a man! What a man!"
If you were wondering where those guys were, they were with this mom.
I was a skinny little
Cornered
guy
the market.
with these skinny little arms going, oh, I wish I could look like Daddy. You know, but he did not want me being a sissy, and one of the first things he did is he taught me to fight. I was maybe 6 or 7 at the time. One of the first things he did was he got all the little neighborhood boys into our living room, put boxing gloves on them, put boxing gloves on me, and said, "Go at it." And I didn't know what to do, and I was just being pummeled to death. You know, I'd turn my back on him, I'd get down, he'd lift me up, and one after the other, these guys kept bouncing their fists off me until finally I started fighting back. By then I was so exhausted I couldn't have hurt a fly, you know. And one of the kids I recall saying something like, "Geez, my pop would kill him," you know, and embarrassed Nick. And so finally, I'm slobbering, the blood's running down me, he picks me up and he throws me into my bedroom. But that wasn't the last time. He kept doing that. And then he would fight me and he'd get on his knees and say, "Come on, tough guy, come on," you know. And so eventually I just started hitting as hard as I could, and he'd let me do it for a while, and then he'd deck me. Every time he'd deck me, you know. Because you got to learn, you know, you got to be able to take this stuff. So when I went to school, I was a lot tougher than I actually thought I was. I didn't want to fight there either, but I was put in the wrestling class. I was very strong for my size, and no one could beat me. At least at my weight, no one could beat me. And I found out then, and it gave me confidence that I'd never had in my life. I didn't think I could beat anybody at anything, you know. I couldn't even make decent grades in school. But because I could wrestle so well, I kept doing it, and I won a lot of respect, and kids wanted to hang around with me, and so that kind of changed my life, and I would go home, and I'd be a little more chin up to Nick. But he'd always find ways of putting me down anyway, you know, you're not so tough, you don't have enough lead in your ass, you know, he just would go at me about different things.
It's the kind of stuff that someone would remember no matter how old they got, you know, because when you're thinking about memoir and looking back and what is it you remember. Now, as easy as you kind of were on your mom, the person that got exposed the most, I feel, is your sister, Carol Marie. And I have the feeling that you guys still have a close friendship.
Oh, she's my closest friend. I mean, other than Ricky, she is my closest ally, supporter. You know, when any of my books come out, she's out there, she's buying them, she's going to bookstores. She says, "Why don't you have Duff Brenna's newest book?" And so she pushes and pushes. She was going to try to come up here, but she's got a sick husband at home who's got a heart problem.
Oh, that's too bad, because I would like to have met her. But that quote, that you take the obscene and turn it into the sublime, I think had a lot to do with the way that you wrote about her abuse. A lot of times when we read memoirs or biographies, about children who are sexually abused, we never quite know what's going on. And yet, in the book, you are very graphic in describing exactly the horrors that this little girl had to endure, and that you were an eyewitness to this. How did you make that decision to be so explicit?
I think Carol would have insisted on it anyway. I passed all of this by her, and one day we were talking about it, and she was telling me how I had some things wrong here and there, and then she just went into this total confessional stage in which she told me everything she could remember, all the stuff that she had blanked out all these years. She told me everything she could remember about those years and how it started. I mean, she knew exactly when it started. It started, actually, we were living in Illinois when he started messing around with her. How long it went on. And I knew something was going on. I mean, I was stupid. I mean, he would have me get up. My mother worked Saturday mornings. So Saturday mornings was when Carol would get called into the bedroom. And he would have me go out, feed my little sister, and then start cleaning the house and doing the laundry and all this stuff. And my older sister would be there in the room with him. And I couldn't bring myself to tell my mother. I feared him. I thought he might kill me if I did something like that. Carol at the same time said she didn't tell our mother because Nick told her, if you tell your mother this, you know what's going to happen to her? She's going to end up in an insane asylum. She's going to be in a hospital. You're going to lose her forever. So Carol just kept her mouth shut for, what was it, the 4 years that went on? Until finally, one day, something came up. Well, he was hunting. He was out hunting. Carol and my mom were sitting in the kitchen talking about men. My mom loved to talk about men. And he came up as a subject, and something like words to this effect. She said, "Oh yeah, I know about Nick," or something like that. And my mother looked at her with that piercing look that she would get in her eyes sometimes, and she said, "Has he ever touched you?" And Carol said, right then it all came out. She said, "Oh yeah, he's touched me, and more." And so she confessed the whole thing. And that evening when he came home from his hunting trip, my mother met him at the door with a German Luger in her hand.
Woo! Yay!
Yeah. And she pointed right at his head, and this is the only time I ever recall seeing him. He had an olive complexion, turned totally white. And she said, "You get out of here or I will kill you." And he did. Out the back door he went, actually. He ran down the alley, and just to emphasize what she was saying, she shot twice into the air. And she threw all of his clothes over the fence into the alley. And
Yay!
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is true, but emotions and love and relationships are complicated. Just because she got rid of him, that moment doesn't mean that that's how things stayed.
No, they didn't stay. Yeah.
Which is really, really confusing to a reader, because you know how you guys got, oh yeah, and then that's where your mom was so difficult to figure out.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that she ever went back to him, but he was never entirely out of you guys' lives.
He eventually was entirely, but he lived in Aurora. He was stationed at Laurie Air Force Base, if any of you know that. And I had just gone nuts. I was this kid with a hole in his head, and this is when I was doing all this car stealing and getting in all kinds of trouble and getting in jail and so on and so forth. And I think it was the third time that I was put in jail. Judge Jacobucci said, you got to do something with this kid because he's going to go to reform school. And you know what happens to kids that go to reform school? They end up major criminals. They come out of there worse than when they went in, and I don't want that to happen to Duffy. Right. And so in desperation, if you can credit this, Nick had by that time been stationed at Elmendorf in Anchorage, Alaska, and about as far away as he could get from us.
Mm-hmm.
And he came to her and called her and said he heard what was going on. He said, you tell that judge I know how to keep that kid straight and send him up here to me. And he did. He sent me up there. But it was actually a good thing that it was just one-on-one. I'm 15 years old now. Nick is, 40-something. And the two of us got along really well at first. And I was trying to be as good a person as I could possibly be because I didn't want him beating me up and I didn't want him sending me back to jail. And then all this niceness, it just went away one day when he got drunk, which always brought out the meanness in him. We were on a fishing trip. He got drunk, he brought out his rifle, he's shooting at birds, he's shooting at fish, and he's telling everybody what a good shot I am. He taught me to shoot a rifle, and I was pretty good at that time. He put a rock on a log. He said, show him how you do it, kid. Shoot that off of there. And I missed. So I tried as hard as I could, but I missed. And that just set him into his... it just took everything back to the way it was at the beginning. He was just enraged that I had made a liar out of him. And I knew right then, oh, the old Nick is back. The old Nick is back. And so all we did most of the time was stay drunk. He would be drunk, I would be drunk. We'd go into these bars. I was 15 years old going into these bars and watching these B-girls dance, carry on. And eventually I said, you know what? If you don't get out of here, you're gonna end up dead in the gutter, or you're gonna end up just like him. And so I called my mom and I told her, this isn't working out, Mom. You know, I'm drinking all the time. Nick is back to his old ways. I've been writing her letters that he dictated to me. Tell your mom how good I am. Tell your mom I'm not drinking. Tell your mom this and then. And I always loved your mother. She's always the love of my life. And so I'm writing this stuff down, doodling, sending it off. Finally, I said, you know, Mom, it's all a lie. You know, he's just the same old bastard he always was. And she said, well, you're getting out of there. And she bought a ticket for me on the airline, and I went down there. I left everything so he wouldn't even know I was gone for a while. And I flew back to Denver and did one of the next stupidest things I've ever done in my life, because when I got back, my mother said, now, I had a girlfriend then that I had run away with. Her name was Sherry, and I just thought she was wonderful. And my mom said, now listen, you're here to not make trouble. Don't you call that Sherry, and don't you call Jerry, don't you call any of your old friends. And what the first thing I do? I call Sherry. And her mom answers the phone. And she recognizes my voice. And she tells her husband, Duffy is back in town. And her husband just hated my guts. And, you know, it wasn't 3 hours later, there was a cop there to pick me up and take me back to Brighton County Jail. And that's when, that's the fourth time I went in front of Jacobucci. Actually, he came into my cell, something that never happened to me before. I write about it in the book because it was so astonishing to see this wonderful judge, you know, in his beautiful suit come in and sat down with me at the little table that was in there and talked to me about my life and told me, everybody wants me to send you to Golden, and it seems like you're incorrigible. Everybody says you're incorrigible. He says, but I'm not going to do it because I know that you have relatives in Minnesota, and your aunt and uncle want you. And so this is your last chance, kid. If I see you back here again, I'm going to put you in Golden. I don't want to, but I will. So he never saw me again, ever.
Those are some pretty amazing people, your family in Minnesota, to hear, there's this kid, he's nothing but trouble, send him up here. And I was thinking about, memoir versus fiction, because I think that Sherry, an adventure that you and Sherry had, became the basis for a novel.
Yes.
But then again, it shows up as reality in the memoir.
Right.
So what happened is that Duff and Sherry and another couple of 15-year-olds in a stolen car decided to just take off. and that became the novel Too Cool.
Right. That was the beginning of. I mean, that was the source of writing Too Cool was what actually happened to us when we went on this journey. We were going to go to California, and I was going to get a job on a fishing boat, and we were going to get married, and all this stuff that you dream of.
No,
when
it's a
you're
nice
kid,
it's a nice idea.
Yeah.
Just that Sherry's parents didn't know where she was, and that's why the dad hated you so
Oh,
much.
God,
I mean, you
and he was an Army officer.
right,
Woo!
and he was a mess too. I mean, the book seems to me like a parade of irresponsible, undependable, questionable adults.
A lot of dysfunction going on.
Oh my God!
Everybody.
Yeah. And so, I just wanted to ask you to read us a little bit of from the memoir.
Okay.
Anything you want. We're all ears.
Okay. Why don't I just read the opening?
Okay.
So, the title of this is Remember Her As She Was, and that's from a poem that Jack Marshall, I hope some of you have heard of Jack Marshall, because he's one of the greatest poets in this country right now. And he let me use it. The mom was always looking for love. She had numerous lovers who came and went in her life, one-night stands, a few days or weeks, maybe months. Some she even married. She was married 6 times. The longest marriage was with her 4th husband. They were together 13 years before he died of cirrhosis in 1975, 10 weeks short of his 50th birthday. His name was George Miles. In looks, he resembled her 3rd husband, Nick Pappas, tall, dark, heavily muscled. The two of them might have passed for brothers, except that George Miles, a retired San Diego police officer, had for the most part conquered his dark part. Nick Pappas never conquered his dark side. George Miles was decent, supportive, loving husband, a source of strength, guidance, and wisdom, which was exactly what the mom needed. Someone to be her keeper. A rational man, 6'2" father figure, a man she couldn't rule or fool, a man she would listen to because she not only loved him, she respected him, which was something not new but very rare in her life. Truth is, until George Miles came along, the mom was ambiguous about the male species. Dubious, curiously schizophrenic, cursing them, adoring them, cynical about them, yet time after time converted. She admired manliness, coveted it. Clark Gable, Charlton Heston types, the Victor Mature of Demetrius and the Gladiators, war heroes like John Wayne. She believed he won the Battle of Iwo Jima, never knowing her idol had sat out the war, deferred. She wanted men who were broad at the shoulder, narrow at the hip, strong, silent cliches, admired them, wanted to be them. But in her heart of hearts, they frightened her. She didn't trust them. She used them, bullied them if they let her, tried to morph them into her protectorate daddies that would fill her needs, the needs missing in her life since she was a child. She wanted a man who made her feel safe, secure, loved, cherished, adored. For those 13 short years, George Miles played a part as if he were born to it. He was 5 years the mom's junior. She called him Daddy, as she did all her husbands. All of them. Daddy. Daddy. Her real daddy abandoned the family when she, little red-haired Janice, was only 5. You don't have to be Freud to understand why she needed to be saying Daddy all her life.
Wow.
Thank you. Sometimes we wonder, why we read memoirs, why we want to read somebody else's life. I can tell you that reading your memoir answers so many questions about my own family, my own mom. Completely different stories. But I think that we find some kind of comfort in the identification